Welcome to Gemara Academy. In this class we will learn the Gemara Masechta Shabbos and the Daled Amud Aleph. Let's begin with a general outline of the Gemara. In the previous Gemara we presented a question of Rav Bibi Bar Abaya. Rav Bibi Bar Abaya asked, what's the din if somebody placed bread in an oven on Shabbos and now he wants to remove the bread before it comes to an Isser Chatas, because if the bread breaks, that's Asam and Atera, it's an Isser Chatas. Did we permit him to remove it or not? The question is that to remove bread from an oven is Asam and Rabbanan. So did we remove the Isser during Rabbanon and permit him to remove the bread so that he doesn't come to an Isser Torah? Or is the din that we leave the Isser Rabbanon in place and we do not allow the individual to remove the bread even though it will lead to an Isser Torah? So in our Gemara, we're going to point out that it's hard to understand this question of Bibi Bar Abaya, because if we look at it, we'll see that there's no way that we can actually interpret the question and it should make sense and fit into the words of Rav Bibi Bar Abaya. Let's now see the Gemara in the flowchart form. So the Gemara basically presents this teaching of Bibi Bar Abaya. It's in a purple arrow because it's leading into a question. Rav Bibi Bar Abaya asked, what's the din if somebody placed bread in the oven on Shabbos and now he wants to remove it? Did we permit him to remove it and in the process remove the Isser Rabbanan, and that way it doesn't come to an Isser Torah? Or do we leave the Isser Rabbanan in place, that one can't remove bread from the oven even though it'll lead to an Isser Torah? So Rav Acha Bar Abaya asked Ravina, Hechidami, how is this case? And that's the whole question. That's what we'll see. The rest of the question is an arrow. The question is, how is this case? In other words, he's saying this case doesn't make any sense. No matter how you look at it, it won't fit into the words of Rav Bibi Bar Abaya, and it won't make sense. Let's go through all the possible ways of learning the question. If we'll say that he did it by mistake and he didn't realize, in other words, the person put the bread in the oven and he never had awareness that he did this mistake. So then Laman Hitiru, who's the question? Did they make it mutter for him to remove it or not? This individual doesn't even realize that he put it into the oven. Elo, what are we going to say rather? The Hadar V'Hitkar, that he realized he put it in originally, he didn't realize that it was Asr. After putting it into the oven, he became aware, oh my, it's Asr, I want to remove it. But then it doesn't make any sense that Rav Bibi said, do we permit him to remove it before it comes to a Chiyuv Chatas? Or do we not permit him to remove it even though it comes to a Chiyuv Chatas? Because this is not a case of a Chiyuv Chatas. We learned in the Mishnah that Kol Chayav V'Chatois, all those that are Chayav to bring a Korban Chatas, they're not chayiv achatei tchilosan v'seifim b'shgaga. They're not going to be chayiv until the beginning is shegig and the end is shegig. In other words, the person is in a state of shegig, of doing it by accident from beginning to end. In this instance, the person became aware that he put the bread into the oven. There's not going to be any chiyuv chatas anymore because it's not shegig. The shegig was only at the beginning, not at the end. So then the words of Rav Bibi Bar Abaya won't make sense. There's no chiyuv chatas. And rather we're going to say that he did it on purpose. Then his question shouldn't have been, do we permit him to remove it before he comes to a chiyuv chatas? We're going to say the question was, somebody put bread in the oven on purpose, and then regretted it and wants to remove it. But the question wouldn't be, do we permit him to remove it before he comes to a chiyuv chatas? Because it's not a case of chatas. Chatas is only for shegig. This is an isser skila. So, hechidami, how is this case? If we look at it, there's no way that we can make sense of this questioner of Bibi Bar Abaya. If he was shegig throughout, then who are we going to make it permitted for? The guy is not even aware that he did the Avera. If he became aware, then it's not any more Chiyuv Chatas. If it was B'mezid, it's not either a Chiyuv Chatas. It's an Isser Skila. So we have the answer here of Rav Shilai. Rav Shilai says that it's referring to a case that he remembered after. He was shegig throughout. So there is a Chiyuv Chatas. That's the case. And now he supports it. What about our question? Then who are we making it permitted for? This person's completely unaware. And for who would they make it mutter? La'acherim, fathers. In other words, the question of Bibi Bar Abaya was, or is, if an individual placed bread in the oven, b'shegig, and he remained in a state of shegig, and let's say he wandered off, and another person observed this, he wants to know, am I permitted to remove the bread from the oven and do an Isser D'Rabbanan so that my fellow doesn't come to an Isser D'Atera? Because once it bakes, that's Isser D'Atera. So that's the case. That's the question of Bibi Bar Abaya. That's the case that he asked this question on when the person was shegig throughout, and the question is somebody else allowed to remove it from the oven so that his fellow doesn't come to an Isser D'Atera? However, Rav Sheshes doesn't like this explanation. He asks a question on it. Do we tell one person to do an Avera so that his fellow benefit? If a person himself will either come to an Isser Torah or Isser D'Rabbanan, we can ask, did the Rabbanan allow him to actively do an Isser D'Rabbanan in order to avoid the Isser Torah that will develop? That's a question that we can ask. However, Rav Sheshes is of the opinion that we would never ask, do we permit somebody to do an Isser D'Rabbanan so that somebody else doesn't do an Isser Torah? For this individual, there's no Isser Torah involved. There's no Isser D'Rabbanan that needs to do. Why would we now tell him to do an Isser D'Rabbanan so somebody else benefit? Rav Sheshes is of the opinion that that's not something that we would ever do, and therefore Rav Bibi Bar Abaya would not have asked that question. Now we give an alternative answer from Rav Ashi that actually the case is that it was on purpose. And what about our question that it's not Isser, it's not a Chiyuv Chatas, it's an Isser Skila. Ve'ema, and say, Kodim Shiyava L'dei Isser Skila. Say in the questioner of Bibi Bar Abaya, change the words to be permitted to remove it before it comes to an Isser Skila. So here we have the answer of Shilei and the answer of Avashi. And now the Gemara brings a related teaching to the answer of Avashi, and that is that Rav Acha Bered Rava actually taught it behedya clearly. When we say clearly, he taught two things clearly. Number one, that he didn't teach the questioner of Bibi Bar Abaya as a question, but rather as a teaching. And number two, that he said openly that it was an Isser Skila over here and not a Chiyuv Chatas. And it was Rav Bibi Bar Abaya said that if somebody put bread in the oven on Shabbos, he tiru loiler daisa, they permitted him to remove it before he comes to an Isser Skila. So it wasn't presented as a question, but rather as a teaching, and it clearly referred to an Isser Skila and not a Chiyuv Chatas. So to summarize, we had a question. What is the dilemma of Rav Bibi Bar Abaya? Do we allow the person to remove it before he comes to a Chiyuv Chatas or not? If we look at the case, there's no way of interpreting it that it should make sense and fit in his words. If he was a shaygig throughout, then Lamani Tiru, what are they going to make a mutter for? This person's not aware. If he became aware, then the wording doesn't fit because it says Chiyuv Chatas. There's no Chiyuv Chatas if a person became aware of his Avera. And if he did it on purpose, once again, there's no Chiyuv Chatas. It's an Isser Skila. So we presented the answer of Rav Shilai, that he was a shegik throughout. Therefore, there is a Chiyuv Chatas. The question is, did they permit it for others? And then we presented the answer of Rav Ashi, that he was amazed. And we have to change the words in the question, did they permit him to remove it? Kodim shiyavai l'dei Isser Skila.